Hi, this is Jeff again with more blunt talk about Bernie. This time let's deal with that bugaboo, socialism. Sticks and stones may break my bones, but names will never hurt me. I don't know whether that nursery rhyme is still current, but you can get the drift. This is true except in politics. There goes the fear. But how does this fear of the names get traction? Let's try a little experiment. Think of a message that can be understood by everyone, from Einstein to a functional idiot. What is that message that you're thinking of? Keep it in mind. Now I'll write the answer and show it to you on a piece of paper. Okay, here it is. That's right, a blank sheet of paper. Nothing. A blank page can be understood by anyone because it's devoid of has a total lack of content. Hence, the message has perfect popularity in the sense that it's universally understandable for what it is, which is meaningless. But the principle here can apply to messages that have content too. The simpler the content, the more easily and widespread it seems to be grasped. The problem is the simplification may be too simple, a distortion, but too often people latch onto it anyway because the simple message is a certainty that requires no other effort to assess it, to question it, whether it's actually true and useful. It just seems to be common sense. Let's move on, shall we? Is the reaction. When you come to a term like democratic socialism, it falls prey to the syndrome. First, the democratic gets stripped off and you see only socialism. Then you see communism, Lenin and Stalin, and people living drab material lives, owning nothing but their own enslavement. I'm telescoping the process here, but I'm sure you recognize the drift. You know, it's a lifetime of pop cultural images injected into your life that has produced this reflex, if you're a person susceptible to it. People with power and access to grind welcome your thinking in this way, crowding in associations that are ready made rather than looking for sense and meaning. It's non thinking, really, because this process instills fear and it serves their purposes, the ones with the axes to grind. But you need to think outside the box if you want to be truly free. Mark E. Anderson in Daily Kos has written this of democratic socialism. Social ownership of the means of production, but with a democratically elected government. The formal definition is a political ideology advocating a democratic political system alongside a socialist economic system involving a combination of political democracy with social ownership of the means of production. We have many aspects of democratic socialism in the U.S. today. Public libraries, snow removal, trash pickup, police protection, fire protection, Medicare, and Social Security are just a handful of examples. The sense of this, to me, doesn't quite jibe with the formal definition that demands a socialist economic system, if that means capitalism is seen as a problem to be consigned to retirement to the point where it no longer exists and state owns everything. I doubt Bernie Sanders sees that either. His career certainly hasn't shown it. And since he's a confessed admirer of FDR's form of unacknowledged democratic socialism when he developed the New Deal, both of them are closer to the social democracies of Europe, wherein, in fact, capitalism is more controlled than it is in the U.S. In short, it's given a conscience via government oversight. The government doesn't take the existing whatever I'm your flunky complicity approach that we seem to have right now. You know, if we think clearly without fear-driven bias, we can see our way to what democratic socialism might mean in our political situation. It can mean something this simple. Identify those needs of the general welfare of society. Remember that term, general welfare? It's in the preamble of the Constitution, one of its purposes. Identify the needs of the general welfare that should be supported and address them through government means or guidance. The democratic process helps identify needs or problems widespread enough to be considered universal and worthy of universal buy-in to address them. Arbitrary market-based activity under no one's control can't do this without impoverishing too many lives and even destroying some of them in the process of working itself out, if it ever does. Here's an example of this clearer thinking. Take healthcare. It's something that every human being needs to one extent or another. It's a given. Because all citizens, or consumers if you prefer, need it, they do not form a real market. A market identifies and targets for sale a segment of the overall population with a need or desire for the service involved. Any so-called market that comprises everybody is really a captive audience. No more a market than the market for water or air. It approaches the status of a utility. Utilities are controlled since they must be available to everyone, and working toward universal health care and single payer is a logical way to deal with this need in the health care realm. Private health care insurance over and above has a true niche market. Those who are well off enough to value the comfort and convenience of extra care beyond the standard. Now, take also the so-called minimum wage and its increase. Thinking about it in this very term, minimum wage, already traps your thinking inside the box. If a job being done for a wage is not performed for reasons other than material gain, that is, if you don't need it alone to give you the means to live comfortably, then minimum makes some sense. That's your so-called high school students working their way into the workforce while living at home. But if the job has to be depended upon to live, then living wage makes sense. There's no way that any job being done full-time by one person with no other means of support should produce a return below that needed to live in society without distress and uncertainty. That's the minimum that applies to the job. Its wage allows you to live at a guaranteed minimal level. The wage itself is then a living wage, not a minimum wage. Make sense? Needs like health care and worker compensation are legitimate targets for a truly functional government to address, whether you call it strategy, democratic socialism, or social democracy. If you think about the term in this way, rather than as a misinformed, fear-driven boogeyman, you can't fear a candidate who uses it as a philosophical label, or an ideological one if you prefer that lingo. Here's FDR again. We have nothing to fear but fear itself, as well as the names, which really need not hurt me, that foster that fear. See you next time.